we'll go ahead and get started, and if other people wander in, that'll be great. So you guys all met Debbie, it's fantastic. I'm Amanda, I'm the company manager at Northern Stage, and we know who you are, which is beautiful. And we'd also love to ask, just initially, if there's anything in particular that you're hoping to get out of this talk, or what brought you here today? What do you want to know?
I love Blithe Spirit, so I was curious what you were going to say about it or do with it. I didn't know whether you were going to read through or, what really the presentation was going to be.
Well,
Yeah.
go ahead. You have to,
Well, this is like my first one ever, so I'm like here just to experience it. Yeah.
I'm kind of, I'm always impressed with the output, and we have this jewel of a theater in our community. So a question that is kind of on my mind is, the most recent thing I saw at Northern Stage was, as Deb said, the New Works Festival. So 3 brand new works, still somewhat in process, right? And I know we're here to talk about Blithe Spirit, which has been, given when it was written, done many, many times. So a question that I have is, what do you think about when you think about, how do you go about thinking about introducing a new or fresh approach while respecting a tried and true production, a tried and true work? Yeah. Because the director has probably some latitude, right?
Mm-hmm. That's actually, that's great.
Come join.
Yeah, come on in. Part of what we were going to start with was talking about some of that pre-production process and what happens, before even the actors arrive, when a director is first given a show to do, and what their research process is and thoughts and.
Bless you.
Because it's a collaborative effort where the director will meet with their design team and sort of decide on direction for the show, and what they might want to do differently, or what they might want to focus on that maybe other productions haven't. If they want to go a very sort of literal reading of the text and just present it exactly the way it was sort of written to be presented, or if they want to put a different take on it. So it's a great question, because that's a little bit about what I was planning on talking about.
Great.
And what were you guys hoping to?
I'm kind of interested in the mix of the. I mean, you obviously have to have a mix of plays because the different audiences want to see different things, and obviously we all enjoy some much more than others. We really dislike some, and so why Noel Coward? No matter which one it was.
Okay. We'll just keep going, and then we'll sort of take all of this.
Well, I guess that's my question. I mean, where does Noel Coward? So if you it's a 5 or 6 play run? I can't remember. You do 5 or 6?
We do 6.
So 6, right? So what do you see as the mix of the 6 plays, and where would a Noel Coward, light, breezy,
Right.
effervescent, fit in that spectrum from serious to? I'm so full of something I've seen somewhere else, which is National Theatre Live, Mice and Men right now, that it's hard for me to get back to what we last saw at Northern Stage, to tell you the truth.
Sure.
I mean, talk about a really serious, heart-rending play. I mean, you always do something that, has us in tears, and then you have to do something that makes us laugh, and
That's a great question.
because you see the audience in the Upper Valley as wanting what kind of mix?
Right. Well, that's something that our artistic director, Carol Dunn, she, although she's also very collaborative and always, she'll wander through the office, and we actually just all sat around in a circle the other day talking about next season, where she said, all right, like this slot, this is kind of what I'm looking for, like throw ideas at me. What are some plays that you guys are thinking of? And it's putting together an entire season, sometimes around maybe a certain theme, or not theme, but just something that we want to evoke. So this season, for example, is a transformative season. So we started with Into the Woods, And we're ending with Songs for a New World. You know, Northern Stage is going through a lot of transformations. We're building a new theater building that'll be our own. And so a lot of the plays, you know, had something to do with a transformative experience. And typically this spot, I think, you know, it's the middle of winter, it's bleak and it's sad out, so this spot tends to be somewhere that we like to throw a comedy. So last year we did Fox on the Fairway. So there's a little bit of that, sort of where in the season a show will fit to, you know, bring about a certain mood that is maybe the right time for. So, great, this is Lily King.
Hi everyone.
Hi.
Sorry I'm late.
Okay.
She just got out of rehearsal, so
Yeah,
it
yeah.
was literally just right.
We were supposed to start rehearsal on Tuesday, but because of the big storm, a bunch of our actors couldn't get in until today. So we went a little long with our rehearsals to try to make up some of that time. It was an exciting day. It's a good day.
Yeah, so we've just been sort of talking to people here, asking what they hope to get out of this evening. And one thing that we talked about was, you know, the director's take on the show. So that's something that you guys can talk about here in a minute.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So our newcomers, hi, welcome. My name's Amanda. I'm the company manager at Northern Stage. And yeah, we'd love to know what you're hoping to get out of this talk here today. If there's anything, you know, that you came here hoping to hear.
Well, it prepares you for the play.
Mhm.
Often my husband and I drive home to Cornish and are debating what really was not the quintessence of the play.
Mm.
Because if you just stumble into it, you miss a lot. So we think this is a fantastic occasion that we get a little bit more prepared.
Absolutely. I know my mom always likes to read the play before she comes to see it, especially if it's like Shakespeare or something like that. But have you guys done a summary of what the play's about?
No, we just finished going through, talking to people a little bit, so yeah, we can turn it over to Lillian King, our director. Debbie is also assistant directing and has basically been a dramaturg for the play, so doing a lot of background research and helping gather information. So these guys can talk about the show itself and inspiration.
How many of you know Blithe Spirit?
Quite a few.
Yeah, have you seen it before? And how many of you know Noel Coward? Have seen another Noel Coward play? Yeah, so he's got 5 major comedies. He wrote a lot more. He wrote something like 60 plays, but only 5 of them sort of remain popular today. And that's Hay Fever was sort of his first big success. Private Lives is one that I would say that's probably the most famous. Blithe Spirit was a later play. I'm not going to get the order of the last 3 right. Design for Living is not done as often, but very, very funny. Similar to Private Lives in that it's like couples switching around, but instead of 4 people, it's 3 people. It's 2 guys and a girl, and they go through all the different permutations, which is a little more risque because it throws in sort of, not that there's never an explicitly homosexual relationship, but it's sort of hinted at, I guess. And then Present Laughter is the last one, and that's, actually, I saw a revival of that like maybe 5 years ago in New York, but I don't feel like it's done very often. But yeah, so Blithe Spirit, one of his major successful comedies, and basically it's about this writer, Charles Condamine, who he's like a mystery writer, and he is married. It's his second marriage, and you learn that his first wife died rather young. And he has this sort of very normal, happy, witty, of course, because it's Coward, relationship. And he's doing research for his newest book, which is going to be about a psychic medium. And so in order to do research, he has invited a real psychic medium over to the house. And he's also invited another couple, so they have enough people for a seance. And they all think it's, you know, complete fake. But they go into this seance, and Charles starts to hear the voice of his first wife. And he thinks it's some sort of trick, obviously, and everybody freaks out, and the seance is over, and everyone goes home. And then the ghost of his first wife, Elvira, appears. And he can see her and hear her, and we as the audience can see and hear her, but no one else can. So obviously you get some very funny situations where his second wife, Ruth, is in the room, and he's talking to what to her seems like nothing. And, and he yells at one of them and she thinks he's, very funny situation to get put into. And as it goes on, it becomes clear that like Elvira doesn't know how she got there, she doesn't know how to leave, she's probably gonna be there forever, and Ruth gets very upset. And then accidents start happening. Their maid, Edith, falls down the stairs, she slips on something, and Charles breaks his arm because he falls off of a ladder. And Ruth finally figures out, the second wife figures out the first wife is sabotaging the things so that she's trying to kill Charles so that he can be with her in the afterlife. Which all this sounds very dark, but it's actually very funny. And then I know, I kind of don't want to spoil it.
Don't spoil it.
That's enough.
Okay, I won't tell you what happens at the end. But it keeps going, and
Yeah.
hilarity ensues, and it just like the whole thing builds up to
Yeah.
a crazy, funny ending. But yeah, it's a comedy about ghosts, and written actually during the Second World War, at a time when people were very into spiritualism and contacting people beyond the grave, because of course they were losing, particularly in England, everyone was losing people, and but he deals with it in a way that's totally not real. He never references the war. Elvira, it's said she dies, she's convalescing from a cold, and she hears a funny BBC radio broadcast and laughs so hard she has a heart attack. That's how she dies. Whereas, and obviously people in the audience are, know a much more serious reality. But that was always sort of his thing, was to lift up his audiences and entertain them. He did write some more serious plays, but they were never very successful. And with this one, he was definitely just trying to give his audiences an escape from the really awful stuff that was happening around them. So that's the plot, and a little bit about Noel Coward. We can talk more about him if you want.
What's so wonderful about this is that it was in 1941, and you pointed out that it was made in 5 days. And he wrote in 5 days. 6 weeks later, it's produced in Piccadilly Theatre in London, and then shortly after that, it goes to to another theater that is now currently shut down. But it makes it to New York, right? So he's a very famous guy in both places in North America and over across the Atlantic. So what's very cool about this is that, as Lily mentioned, he's trying to entertain, and it's something we call escapism, where he doesn't mention anything about it's 1941. It is the middle of World War II.
Yeah.
And he doesn't mention it at all in it. So it takes you away. And Lily did a great job making it very playful and very fun. And so some of the inspiration, which I thought was really wonderful, is sort of like Matilda. It's this magic that's very beautiful. So, and then there's entrenched jealousy and relationships that I'm sure you all know a lot about. So I think it'll resonate pretty deeply, which is cool. And the other questions, or the other things that came up, were just sort of your first rodeo, right?
Yeah,
So that's okay.
Yeah.
And then just sort of generally, I wish we could give you a reading, but it's just what they had hoped to get out of it. So.
Yeah, I don't know, there's not really a reason to have questions about the plot, but, or questions about, I'm also happy to answer questions about like directing. Oh yeah, we said director's take.
Yeah, there was one question, was given something that has been done multiple
Yes.
times, and there's been a movie and a musical adaptation.
Great movie.
How do you, bring new life into something and put your own spin on it when it's been
Yeah.
voiced multiple times?
It's a very interesting question, and I recently graduated with my MFA in directing, and I think the MFA is a lot about putting your spin on things and how do you reinterpret classics. And this really is a classic. It's not classical, but it is a classic. And with this one, I felt like for the first time in a long time, it kind of just needs to be done, and done well. you're not gonna set it like on the beach or, I don't know, in a Jell-O mold. Like, it has to be in a living room, that's what makes, and we were talking about it today, in our first rehearsal, we're getting up on our feet and playing around with the drink, our poor actor who plays Charles, I think he makes something like 2, 4, 8, 9, 19 martinis in the first scene. It's a 15-minute scene. He makes 19 martinis. And he obviously makes them in batches, but like 19 martinis. And that's, there are other plays where you can cut down a lot of that stuff. You don't need as much stuff, you don't need as much business. And it's such a important part of the fabric of this play, like smoking, and people were saying, are you gonna do the smoking? And they don't talk about smoking. I think there's maybe 1 or 2 references to cigarettes in this play. But you kind of have to do it because it's such a part of the era, and also, Coward writes about society and like the way life is in a way that you want it to feel as real as possible, because that's what makes it funny. It's not real in the sense of like, the hardships I'm suffering, or the jealousy like is eating away at me. It's like kind of a beautiful version of reality, a beautiful version where everybody always has the right witty comeback, and the worst, but even when you die, you get to come back and still have more witty comments. So I feel like for the first time in a long time, I haven't felt felt a need to really change the setting or anything like that, because I think it is of its own time, and also it's pretty awesome the way that it is. You go to it and you see it and you understand it, because the reason to change a setting or a time period or anything like that is to help your audience understand or connect to it. I'm sure some directors do it randomly for sort of intellectual pleasure, but I try when I'm doing something like that to help make a connection, or to explain, I'm trying to think of like what a super concept-y show I've directed. I did a production of Henry V, and it was all women, and that was a given. I had a company of women, and so in order to make that thing, not just sort of a byproduct, I set it in actually World War II London, sort of post-bomb, sort of bombed out London, and they were war widows, sort of telling themselves this story of English heroism to make themselves be able to live with the sacrifices they had made. So that's the kind of concept that it explained why we had all those women, and I think it brought you into this what's a very old story, Henry V. It's not, nobody feels like very strongly about Henry V, and makes it a more immediate feeling. Whereas this, I think, because it's already set sort of in like just sort of happy world, you don't necessarily need to set it now or anything like that to be able to connect to it. I don't know if that answers that question.
Are you gonna do British accents?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, got it. They were doing really well today. But we had a long conversation about, do we say bin or bean? Do we say again or again? And the consistency of that, and if at some point there are people who are dialect coaches, we'll certainly bring in someone if. Actually, our Madame Arcadi is actually British, so that helps. She's a good reference. If we say like, how do you say Canterbury? She knows.
I will say, go ahead.
We just about know Coward in terms of the other plays he wrote. I mean, he wrote a lot of music as well, right?
He did. And
were
poetry.
any of his plays musicals?
He wrote sort of cabarets.
Uh-huh.
He didn't write like sort of traditional musicals in the sense of like Showboat.
Yeah.
But that actually came more from America, sort of as he was writing anyway.
Okay.
So he didn't write fully integrated musicals in that way, I don't think. But he did write. He has some plays that have music in them, and music features in this play as well. It's not performed, but there's a song that sort of kicks off the ghostly stuff. It's an Irving Berlin song, though. It's not an old Coward song.
The one thing I'll also say is that Lily does a great job in making it fresh, is actually cutting it down. So in terms of like really cutting the stuff that's unnecessary and that makes audiences like, okay, you're just saying the same thing over and over again. That there's so many gems that just hit so much harder when it's trimmed.
Well, and part of that too is I think we're not used to sitting through 3-act plays anymore. This is actually a traditional 3-act play. And I know when I go see a play with 2 intermissions, I'm not, like from the outset, I'm like ready to be tired and bored. You know, there's something about that our brains just don't love so much anymore. So we're not, you know, I'm certainly not cutting any plot or anything like that, but it is, there are some repetitions that are just, you know, because he was a great writer and he could write a million great jokes, and so he did. And he, you know, there are just the pace of theater then was just much, not that their lines are slower, but it's just much longer. And I think, you know, for better or for worse, our attention spans are slightly shorter now. And
So will there only be one intermission?
there will only be one
So
intermission.
you,
Yeah, so we take the intermission, there's 3 acts, and I think each act has 2 scenes, so we just take it in the middle of act 2, which it's a great moment for an intermission. It ends in hysterics, and I think what's the last line? It's hypnotism my foot. It's a pretty good line to go into intermission. Other questions about?
When did you first see the script, or were you approached about doing it?
So I actually work at Northern Stage. I am the assistant artistic director and director of education, which I started in November 1st. And when Carol called me to do that job, she said, we don't have a director for Blithe Spirit right now. I've asked someone else, but if they can't do it, I want you to do it. So I started looking at it, but not really. And then like a couple of weeks later, so probably since mid-November I've known. And I didn't know the play. I've never seen it. I had never read it. And you know, as I said, I had seen a bunch of the others, and I went to read Hay Fever thinking I'd never read it, but I had definitely read it before, you know, probably in school and just forgotten. But yeah, I've been working on it sort of since November, and it's nice to have that much time. I've definitely done shows much faster than that. But it's nice to get to, you know, you read the script and you get to go away from it. You get to, you know, you go to the library. I've had library books, the same library books I'm using now I've had out since November. You know, I try to get lots of different kinds of books because it's, you know, boring. You don't want to just read Noel Coward biographies. But I certainly read that and read some books about some friends of his and tried to read a book about spiritualism. I didn't get super far in that. But it's as with anything in Coward, the things you need to know are sort of in the play. You definitely don't need to know necessarily, you know, he tells you what she's doing in the play. But it's good, you know, good to have some history and all of that. And then, you know, we had some auditions. Some of the people were already cast by Carol, the artistic director. She sort of asks people, not everybody auditions, but then our 2 leading ladies, not Madame Arcadi was cast, but the 2 wives, we didn't have, so we got to go down to New York and we did a day of auditions. And interestingly, both women have worked at Northern Stage before, but we still saw them read for it. One of them was in Clybourne Park. I don't know if you guys saw that. She was the pregnant one. She's playing Elvira.
who is deaf?
Who was deaf, yeah.
Yeah, we went up and asked her afterwards what she thought that was about, and we never actually came to any conclusion.
Yeah,
It was very
yeah,
odd.
it's interesting, yeah.
Was it a comment on something?
Right. Yeah, and then the other one has been in a bunch of plays, Alexis Hyatt, a bunch of plays here in years past, including Importance of Being Earnest, which actually a lot of people reference in connection to this play, as well as, what's the other one? Well, Comedy of Errors a little bit, but I don't know, Ernest, definitely, there's something Oscar Wilde-y about this play, for sure.
Could you talk about the audition
Yeah.
process a little bit? That would be
Absolutely,
interesting, what
yeah.
that's like.
So what we do sort of going into it is there's 2 things. We talk to our casting director, who then talks to agents. There's a lot of middlemen. But we will give them a list and say, like, these are people we've worked with before that we would like to see. And then they'll also come up with a list. We'll say, you know, these are the 2 roles. And I'll go through the script and find what we call sides, which is a short piece of a scene. Usually you try to make it a 2-person scene. and mine are always too long, the ones I pick, but usually a page, page and a half, because you have to hear it a lot of times. And then you go in and you have a person every 5 minutes for the day. You take a lunch break, but you see, and so when we went down, we were auditioning those 2 parts, but also the girl for Orwell in America. So there was a little bit of variety. You've got 3 different characters. And it's interesting, sometimes we had people come in and they would read for Ruth, and I would say, I think either I made a mistake or the casting, can you go out and look at the Elvira sides? Because sometimes it's just not quite the right match. And it's sort of an interesting counterintuitive thing, I think, if you haven't done these a lot. If somebody comes in and you really think they're not right, or they're not, it's just really not right, you say like, thank you. I mean, you say it nicely, but and you get them out. Whereas if it's somebody that you like, you give them what we call an adjustment or a note. So because you want to see how they work with you, because you never know, some people are really good at auditioning, but not actually very good at being an actor. So they could come in with this prepared thing and be really amazing, but then when you say like, could you try it this way or that way, they either do it exactly the same, which is a very bad sign, or they can't really take the direction, or they do it beautifully. And I sometimes will even, if somebody comes in and does it like exactly how I've always imagined it to be done, I will still give them an adjustment and say, and a lot of times I'll preface it with like, I don't think this is really right for this scene. I think what you did was exactly right, but can we pretend that you're actually really upset about this and you want to get back at him and do it like that? Because you need to see, they have to do the whole play, so you want to see the different things they do. And then sometimes we have callbacks if we're not sure, but with this round, we sort of were sure. And so we put out the offers, and they said yes, and we got them.
So do they know what the side is, what their lines
Yes,
are gonna be
they get
ahead
it
of
from
time?
their
So they-
agents.
Right, and if it's a 2-person scene, they play against who?
We have a reader, which the casting director hires, and it's someone, they just sit in a chair. So it's sort of, we sit behind a table, and they sit in a chair, and then the person starts standing in the middle of the room. So that person is usually an actor. It's actually a good sort of day job for an actor, because you learn a lot from watching auditions. And they're usually pretty good. They're not like flat and useless, but they do have to read it a million times.
And these people, and the actors come, not because there's an ad in the New York Times saying da-da-da-da-da-da, they come through agents.
Yeah, for us at least. I mean,
Yeah.
there certainly are things called open calls and what are the equity, whatever, there's an equity thing. And theaters are required to do them, so we do one at the beginning of the season where anyone can come, as long as they're in the union. And it's for any play, and I don't even know what we do for sides for that. But that's sort of a chance for like random people to come in, but generally when you're looking for specific parts, you work with the casting director who works with the agents. And we brainstorm on our own too, people we love and people we've worked with before and people we've heard of or seen in things, and try to get them to come in, but yeah.
Well, it's just related, it kind of implied what you said, but I'm wondering what percentage of the actors are equity actors? Generally in a northern stage work.
In the shows, it depends on the size. Obviously our 2-person play, they're both going to be equity. This one we have 4 equity and 3 non-equity, and our non-equities tend to be our locals. So we've got 3 locals in this show, which is great. And
It really depends. It's also, it'll vary for different theater companies. So because of what level theater company we are among Lort theaters, because we are a Lort theater, which is a particular
League of Regional Theaters.
Yeah, it's a particular type of equity theater.
Say that word again?
Lort is what it's called, L-O-R-T,
Right.
League of Regional Theaters.
Got it.
And it's the way equity, there are different sort of equity classifications for different theaters. For example, in Boston, they have a separate called NEAT, which is the New England Area Theaters, which is the equity contract that theaters around Boston operate under. So depending on which equity contract you use, they have different ratios of how many equity actors to non-equity actors they want you to have in your productions.
It is so complicated, and Carol spends more time on the phone with our equity rep saying, can we please have one more equity contract, or can we please have one more non-equity contract, and it's something you can negotiate on a show-by-show basis, but it is close to the bane of our existence. Like, it's really difficult.
What does it mean, that you are paid and not paid?
No, it's you're paid on a union scale or not.
Oh.
And we pay our non-equity actors a certain rate.
Oh.
And that's the non-equity rate. But if you're in equity, you pay dues, and if you work a certain number of weeks, you can get health insurance.
Oh.
You can go to certain auditions.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
But it's a pay scale for the most part. And also things like, but also crazy things. Like, if we want to photograph them in rehearsal, we have to tell them 24 hours in advance. Or they have to have access to a coffee maker at all times.
Right.
Every
My favorite is the housing list.
housing list is insane.
They have to have, a bedside table and a lamp and a radio alarm clock. It's a union, so
Yeah.
they have all of these rules to protect the members of their union, to make sure that they,
Because-
are working under safe conditions and not
Right,
getting.
theaters don't have a lot of
compensated
money, and
right.
Sure.
if we don't have to do it, we try not to.
And
There's
have
also
people
rehearsal
working sure,
rules, like, you have to take a break every, it's
50 minutes, you get
50
5.
minutes you get 5,
Ah.
120 minutes you get, or 110 minutes you get 10.
So where do the actors from out of town live? I've always wondered if they're all up there in the Coolidge.
No,
Most
we
of
used
it's
to.
Queechee.
It's Queechee, Vermont. So we work with a realtor there, and
Okay.
we rent houses and condos, and that's always a fun matrix. That's part of my job, is arranging housing and travel for everybody. So sort of getting people up here and figuring out the best housing arrangements and trying to make a guess of who I think might live well with other people based on, maybe what part I know they're playing. That might tell me a little bit about at least their age and who they might be.
Yeah. We need to talk, because I manage a hotel here, which
Oh,
they're really apartments, they're
Terrific.
gorgeous.
I would absolutely love to chat with you, because housing is always, the Queechee is beautiful, but yeah, it's
Yeah.
always nice to,
Yeah.
to have
It's in White
places.
River.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so.
In the winter, I'll cut you a deal.
That's terrific.
These are all the things that are behind,
Yeah.
every production.
Yeah.
I think that there's always some, how are we going to feed them? How are we going to, all of these things to
Right.
make the conditions right for, we just worked from 10 to 1, and then from 2:30 to 7:30. It's a
Right.
long day.
It is.
And the actors have such a good attitude about it. It's really fantastic, but it is so much of the background team figuring out.
And there's also something to having people enjoy being up here.
Right.
Because you want them to come back, you want them to tell their friends.
Right.
We want people to want to come here, and they do. I think
Right.
we really, it's sort of exotic compared to New York.
Right.
We just did our new play festival, and everybody really loved coming up here for a week. But to be up here for a month, you have to be comfortable and happy and
Yeah.
want to travel, because we don't pay them that much.
Do they bring their own transportation? Do they come up on public transportation?
It depends. Some people drive up, some people we put on the Amtrak train, or there's a really swanky bus service called the Dark Coach
Oh,
yeah.
that comes right up here from
Yes.
New York, so,
It's
yeah.
not much more
How do you,
expensive.
There is a lot of competition between this theater and any of the others.
There can be, yeah. And certainly, I would say most actors, I feel confident saying most actors, if they get offered a job in New York, if they're New Yorkers, will want to stay there.
Yeah.
We can't compete with that. But between other regional, the good news is there are a lot more actors than there are parts. Good news for us.
Yeah.
Bad news with that goes. So we have pretty good luck with people saying yes. But to get someone to leave their home for a
Yeah.
month, you definitely have to offer them something. And sometimes it's the part. Sometimes they're like, I've always wanted to play this part. I'll go anywhere to play this part.
Right.
Or the director. I've always wanted to work with this director. Or it's so many different things. But being a good theater that treats their actors well is a huge part of that. So we try not to abuse them.
this is kind
So
of,
as a theater, you try to to bring that level up, I guess.
Absolutely.
Become more attractive.
Yes, and actors like doing good work, you know, to even
Yeah.
just having our, you know, I mean, certainly the new space, that's gonna be huge, because they're gonna feel like, you know, I'm performing in a brand new theater, that's great.
Right.
And it'll bring in bigger audiences, actors love big audiences.
Yeah. Do theaters have a status, like to them? Does a theater have a status?
Yeah, definitely.
Does
How do you get
Broadway?
that? I mean, no, but how do you get that status?
That's all the things we're doing, building
Oh,
a new theater,
yeah,
audience, you know,
Yeah, well, and then word of mouth really,
Word of
because
mouth.
you
Yeah.
know, when actors come and work for us, and when they go back to their homes and back to New York, you know, they're either going to tell their friends what a great time they had working up the Northern Stage,
Yeah.
or they'll talk about how awful it was, and then
Yeah.
you know people won't want to come
and
audition
it's a
for us.
small world.
Yeah.
Even, you know, so we had our first full day today, and all day, all 7 of the actors, most of whom had never met, were like, oh, so you know that person, I was in a show with
Yeah.
them there, and they all know, you
Yeah.
know, 30
Yeah.
people in common.
Yeah, oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
But you have.
Joy, did you?
Oh, it just was kind of a joke, half
Oh.
question. How do you replace Than Wheeler's as a place to
Oh.
huddle and get together?
Oh,
I-
yeah.
Hopefully
mean-
we're gonna have a bar in the new theater.
Yeah,
knock
okay.
wood.
But in the
Um,
meantime, there's like
meantime,
no
I
place to
know.
go right after the show.
Well, Tucker Box is open
Tucker
a little
Box.
later now.
Okay.
And
And
Elixir.
Elixir's open a bit late. We
Yeah.
actually do, there's one Saturday every show where we do a cocktails with the company.
At
Where
Tucker Box.
Tucker stays open even a little bit later for us
Nice.
specifically, where we invite everybody down and the cast and crew can go and have
Yeah.
a drink, and audience
I
members
think
can
that's
be
on
there.
our brochure, that cocktails with the company.
It's usually the last
28th.
Saturday,
Yeah, the
Yeah.
last
the
Saturday.
performances.
Ah,
It's fun, because they all come and hang out.
yeah.
And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Joy. You
No,
just
no,
been
I-
wanting this.
I know for opera, they have people that go around and review the various companies around the country and talk about, oh, there's great opera in Santa Fe, there's something, you know, going. They must have it for small theaters as well. They kind of critique. No, they don't?
A little bit. I mean, we're not getting reviewed in that way. There are sort of major regional theaters, like, you know, the theaters in DC and Boston, I would say, get
Yeah.
more sort of national attention. But there are, you know, I mean, there definitely is like, there is a Tony for regional theater that happens every year, and there, you know, there are websites like Broadway World, but those still tend to be more focused in cities. We're pretty far out here.
Yeah.
You know, I also worked at Portland Stage Company in Maine, which is a bigger city than White River, but is still pretty, you know, in its own. So I think for us, it's, I mean, obviously we love to be nationally recognized, and we are applying, you know, we apply for national funding, but I think for us, the immediate, you know, we're really the only. You know, there are other theaters in Vermont and New Hampshire certainly, but we're the only regional theater, sort of in this way, and so I think it's for us much more important to be serving that community.
Yeah. Well, what does the community do or don't do that you would like to see happen for you? I mean,
Gosh, I mean, my perspective is always how can we make, you know, how can we bring what we do to the community more? How can we make it more accessible? You know, as director of education, that's a big part of what I think about, because, you know, we have people who come and take classes, and we offer a lot of classes.
yeah,
But we're trying to work on like how can we get to the schools and bring sort of theater education out into communities that either can't afford to come to us, or it wouldn't occur to them to come to us.
right.
We want to make theater a part of people's everyday lives, both children and adults.
Right.
And that's, so, you know, spreading the word is always, that's what we want from everyone.
Is there a show for schools? I mean, is there like, during the school day, is there a show where?
We do
all the-
student
You do?
matinees.
Okay,
Yes,
right.
though not, this year, it's not of every show.
Yeah.
Blithe Spirit does
Yeah.
not have any.
Depends on the production. If
Yes,
it's
sure.
something school appropriate that
Right.
we think would be useful for, you know, classes to discuss and teachers to integrate into a lesson plan.
But that program is growing, and I sort of am passionate about, I actually think it doesn't, I mean, so I was hired after this was all set up for the year, but I think in a way, it doesn't matter. It's this experience of going to the theater. I mean, obviously, you're not gonna send elementary school students to Orwell in America, but, you know, but it, like, just the act of going to the theater and sitting there and getting to talk to actors afterwards, I think you get so much out of it, and because if you don't go to theater as a kid, you're not gonna go as an adult, I don't think. I don't
Right.
know many people for whom that's true.
It's
Right.
usually when people are dragged or
Yeah.
brought
and it's-
on along. with
Yeah,
their
and I mean,
partner
and
and things.
ideally, you know, you make kids regular consumers, and then they tell their parents, and then you
Right.
start to, you know, to spread it that way too.
You don't go into the schools with a skit or something?
We don't, though we're trying, that's something we're trying. We're trying to introduce, in addition to our student matinees, if a school comes, to also have a workshop where we go to them that's linked to the play. And then we're also, this is like in the very baby stages, but we're trying to do a partnership with Dartmouth that would have us go into schools for a couple of weeks and help them learn Shakespeare and put on a very shortened Shakespeare play. So that's sort of in the works for next year. Because it's a big, you know,
Good commitment.
it's a big program, yeah, and you have to find funding and you have to get, Dartmouth is a big institution that takes a while, and so but we're really excited about it and working, you know, sort of working on proposals right now for that.
We usher for performances at the Hop, and we've sometimes done it for the children's show, and that is a trip.
Yeah.
Because you can tell they've never been in a theater before, they
Yeah.
know what's gonna go, and you give them a program, and it's like, you know,
Oh.
and you just think, oh God, please, let it stick.
Yeah,
Let it
keep
stick.
going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Question more about your role as the director
Yeah.
of the play. What do you love about directing, and what challenges do you enjoy?
Well, I'll tell you, so I sort of always say, sort of facetiously, that I've been directing since I was like 6. I have 3 younger siblings, and I used to make them do plays and fashion shows. It was my favorite thing to do, and they would always quit right before the performance. I was tortured. But I was a very bossy child, and I did a lot of theater acting growing up. I actually did Cat Company, which is a camp right around here in the Sunapee area, and all through high school acted in things, and all through college. And when I got to college, all of a sudden it was very hard to get cast in plays. You know, there were a lot of people trying to get into them, and for various reasons, I was not one of them. And an older girl, a senior, sort of took me under her wing and had me work on her thesis as a stage manager and then as an assistant director. And she just said to me, I think you should direct. And she was a senior, so I said, okay. And the next year, she sort of arranged for me to have this directing opportunity. And it was like instantly, and it was a terrible play, terrible experience. It was really difficult. But all of a sudden, all the things that I was bad at as an actor or scared of as an actor or like confused by as an actor, I suddenly understood. It was really an epiphany in a way that I've never experienced for anything else. But I all of a sudden knew how the play should work and what, you know, where people should go and what people, my instincts kicked in a way that they never did as an actor. I was always the actor that you had to tell like where to stand, what to do, and I was not good. And then I was really lucky that I was at Dartmouth, and it's a very small theater department, and I got so many opportunities because I was the only director my year. So there was one term where I said, I don't want to do anything, and they said, well, you have to, because then there won't be anything for anyone else to do. So I directed 3 fully produced shows, including an 18-person musical.
Wow.
And then I went to Portland Stage and then moved to New York, and I did internships in all different things like casting and sort of more artistic management, and started directing some really horrible places, like really awful productions, but also was getting to observe, much more experienced directors, and finally through a bunch of different things got to assistant direct an off-Broadway play, which then transferred to Broadway right at the same time that I started grad school. And luckily, I was very lucky, I got to do both. But I think, the things that I love, so that was, a roundabout, but I love telling stories. I love putting the pieces together. It's like a huge puzzle. And it's much more about listening to and receiving all the other things. Like, you have to have some ideas yourself, but I sort of love it when everyone else has more ideas than I do, because you get to work with the designers and the artistic director and the actors and your stage managers, and just everybody has ideas, and everybody's excited usually, hopefully. And so the collaboration is great, and you're sort of at the head of it. You sort of have to manage it without anyone knowing you're managing them, because artistic types don't like to be managed. And so it's a great challenge. And I was also a psychology major in college, and I think that aspect of it always fascinates me. And so that's, I don't know, that's what I love about directing. But challenges, I mean, everything's kind of a challenge sometimes, and it just depends, the level of actor you're working with. Some actors, and actually it doesn't even, age and experience has nothing to do with it. There are some actors that need a lot of attention and need a lot of babying and they need you to say something so that they can say the opposite, so that then they can come around to your idea, and then there are some actors that you feel like you barely talk to. They come in and they're, they're great people, and they sort of know what they want to do, and it works, and you just kind of keep encouraging them, and they keep playing, and they keep discovering new things. And that's the phase that I'm in right now, is working with the actors. That's what's foremost in my mind. But and there's all sorts of challenges. Like, just even today, it was all about the darn martinis, and how do you get 19 martinis made in 15 minutes. But you work together on it, and it's fun, because this one's especially fun because it's funny. Although everybody says comedy is much harder work than tragedy, because it has to be so precise and clean, and you can't kind of mess around as much. But we're having a pretty good time so far. A lot of laughter today.
I'll ask another question.
Yeah,
Let's-
sure.
Yeah, I want to give others chance. But I mentioned earlier that I really enjoyed the new works, and that Northern Stage did. It was their second year. Just put January in your calendars next year. Yeah, it's really good.
It might be May next year.
Oh, okay,
So
great.
watch out.
Great,
Watch the
that's
website.
great. And so you directed the workshopping process of the new musical, The Last Queen of Canaan.
I did.
So I would love to kind of hear your comparison between your role as director in workshopping a new work,
Yeah.
in contrast to directing something like Blithe Spirit, which is very well
Or the
established.
playwright is dead. I love having a playwright in the room. It's great, and if Noel Coward could be there, I would love it. Although he probably would want to direct it, or be in it, or both. But it's the director's role is much. It's not smaller, but you definitely talk less when the playwright's in the room, because you have this other resource who is more of an expert than you are. And when the playwright's dead or not there, you and the dramaturg are the two experts. And actually, that's one of the sort of definitions of a dramaturg, is you're the sort of the expert and also the champion of the play. So when a director starts being all crazy about let's cut this, or let's make these people lesbians, or whatever, the dramaturg is there not necessarily to say no, but to say I think this is the intention of this moment, or this prop, or this whatever. Which is why having a dramaturg is great when you don't have, and then if you have a living playwright and a dramaturg, they're sort of a team, and they challenge each other, but they also can provide a united front. But a reading like that, it's different from directing a whole production. It really is all about the writers and what they need and what they want, and you just you coach the actor, you work with the actors just enough to get them to bring it to life, because you don't have very much time, and that was a full-length musical. You really want to bring it to life just enough that they can see their work and hear their work and make changes. And the great thing is, when you don't know, you feel I don't understand, what does this line mean? You don't have to spend 20 minutes trying to justify it. You can say to the playwright, what does this mean? And they'll either say, oh, this is what I meant, or they'll say, yeah, that doesn't make any sense, I'll change it. Which is great. And it's sort of great. It's just another teammate, really, but it's in service of them and their work. Whereas this is much more in service of the play, I would say, and the audience's experience of it.
Thank you.
Want to do one more? I have no idea what time it is.
Yeah, we have a couple minutes. Great, 5 to 10 minutes.
Back to Noel Coward for a minute.
Yeah.
Am I completely confused? Did he, of his serious plays, did he write a very anti-war play?
No, he wrote a very pro-war play.
Okay.
What was that called? The one with 400 people in it?
Oh,
Cavalcade.
Cavalcade.
He wrote a 400-person play
Ugh.
called Cavalcade. I think it's like 5 hours long, and it's like it's on a sinking naval ship, and they all have flashbacks to their lives, and it's crazy. It is crazy.
An epic.
But he was a very big patriot and pro. He might have written one post-war though, that I'm not thinking
Who
of.
wrote Man as Superman?
Oh, that's Shaw.
Shoot.
Shaw.
And people have compared him.
Thank you.
Yeah, Bernard Shaw was definitely compared to in critics. I think one of his earliest plays. People were like, "Oh, this is very much like Shaw."
Yeah,
And
he wrote he wrote a play about drugs early on.
The Vortex.
Called The Vortex, and everyone was sort of like, and he met Shaw. There's some sort of apocryphal story about Shaw being like, yeah, like you shouldn't try this. Like don't have a social message. I've got that. I'll do that. You do this other thing.
That was his first big success, though, I think.
Yeah, it was Vortex.
One of the interesting things too about Coward was that he came to New York early on, about mid-20s, and that really changed his plays. He really noted how fast-paced it was, how much more spectacle there was, and it totally changed. From a very chit-chatty type of over coffee to having these more something happens, something starts to happen, despite it being upper mid class people. There was still something that happened, and you can sort of start to see that transformation, which is pretty cool in his plays. No one really reads his earlier ones, but
He also almost always wrote a part for himself. I'm trying to think.
Charles was.
Yeah, he played Charles. This picture on the front there, that's him in the original production, The Curtain Call. He played Charles. He played, I think, Hay Fever, there's not a part for him. But he played Elliot in Private Lives, and he played, and Present Laughter, where that character's name is. I feel like it's George, but I could be wrong. Gary, I don't know. That was the biggest part he ever wrote for himself.
One small note, unrelated to Coward, you were mentioning readers, and I thought this was a funny story. Hackett once told me, Professor Hackett, he works at Dartmouth, Professor Peter Hackett.
Who directed Christmas Carol and is directing Normal in America.
And I'll be assistant directing that one as well, so that'll be fun.
Lovely.
So he said that one time that they were desperately trying to look for an actor, and lo and behold, the reader became that actor, because they were like, no, you're really good, and they gave it to him. And I thought that was a fantastic. Does not happen very often, but they read it all the time.
Yeah.
And we always take our readers' resumes because if they're good, then you want to think about them for other parts.
Just a little funny,
Yeah.
quirky thing. Thank you. We have time for one more question. We should.
You have tryouts up here? Or people who are auditioning here, or only in the city?
We do. I think in the spring, I feel like we do local auditions for the next season because that allows us to sort of know ahead of time, who's up here and who's around. But yeah, and we also cast locals. At this point, I think we feel like we know a lot of the local people, so we might call them in more specifically, like, will you just come in and read for this, as opposed to having a big audition for just one part.
Because we have a lot of transition here in the Upper Valley. We have a lot of people coming in.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, Gordon Clapp just moved up here. Perfect example. You guys know who Gordon is? he played Scrooge in our production of Christmas Carol, but he was on TV. He was on NYPD Blue for 10 years, and he does a lot of shows in New York as well.
He's on Chicago Fire.
He's on Chicago Fire right now. But he sold his house in LA and moved to Norwich.
I just ran into him when I was getting
Yeah.
coffee
He's the best.
today.
Cool.
Thank you guys. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for
Yeah.
coming.
Yeah, this is fun.
Really
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
We'll see you
So,
all
Yeah.
next
so is
show.
the goal to keep doing this sort of thing?
We do them for each show at a different library.
Oh, okay.
So we go to 6 different libraries. So if you can look out and see, I don't know where the next one is.
Ritchie, I think.
It's on the website, I think.
It's on the website.
So-
Yeah, 'cause we used to go over to Northern Stage for stuff.
Well, we do
before.
things like that
We
too.
do that. Is that the Athena lecture?
Athena lecture, yeah.
I know.
And talkbacks.
You did? I heard on the website that scripts for, I think, is it the current season's plays are in the library?
Yeah, so
Which
like you can
library
check out
is
all
that?
of them. So,
Really?
Yeah, so
Oh,
I know
that's
if you check in and then you
wonderful.
can
Okay.
check out Blithe Spirit. I know they
Okay.
also have some free tickets.
Yeah.
If you inquire at the desk about that, so.
Okay, great.
So do you have posters that you put around town, or?
We do.
Yeah.
Hopefully
This
you've
one of
seen
them.
them.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you should give me one, because there's 110 rooms at,
Absolutely. Oh, yeah, and I should get your card.
yeah,
so can
we have to
chat about-
talk. You're gonna love this place.
Yeah.
It's gorgeous.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
I want to know what the significance of the particular house is on the poster.
There's,
It's just a beautiful manor house that Carol Dunn found and said, this is the image for this show. This is perfect.
It is. It takes place all in a room, in
Yeah.
a
Right.
house,
Mhm.
said house.
It's
why
amazing.
do you know the house?
No, it looks like New England, not England.
Yeah, it probably is.
No.
Yes, it probably is, yeah.
We're pulling it in, the connection.
But it's very pretty.
Yeah.
It's very pretty.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you guys.